This is my episode number 18 of my Getting Made Multiculturally podcast. Thank you so much for all of your amazing feedback, encouragement. I feel so energized when I hear back from you guys that you're enjoying these topics that I'm talking about. So it makes me keep going and creating even more, and I have so many more ideas. Today, I wanted to talk about culture shocks, and more specifically, my culture shock that I had when I moved here to America from Europe. I lived in Serbia, Hungary, and Italy. And after that, I moved to America, which was a pretty big jump physically and culturally. It was 10 years ago, so I kind of forgot most of these things. But, I sat down one day and I made a list of things that came in my mind. There are going to be some subcategories that fall into one bigger category because there was just so much. Most of my experiences were around West Coast, so Washington State, Idaho, Oregon, and that's the area where I lived. Now we live in Arizona, but I like to believe that my culture shock has worn out by now. After 10 years, I don't think that you can shock me with anything here anymore. One of my favorite things about doing this podcast is that it forces me to rethink and relive some of my memories that I forgot about because once you get married, you have kids, you start working, it's just lives just kind of get how do you say that? Like life gets away with you. Okay, enough of the pre-talk and let's get into the 6 differences that I had as a culture shock moving to America. Number 1, everything was just so big and there were so many different options to choose from. And I'm not only thinking about grocery stores and food, but also just everything that surrounds you. I remember the first thing I noticed when I came out of the airport and Adam was driving me, how big the streets were, the highways and the cars, and everything was just so open and large. I remember when we walked into our apartment, I saw how big the sink is in the kitchen and the refrigerator, especially in those tiny little apartments that we rented. Everything was just so big and spread out. When we would go to the grocery store, I would constantly take pictures because I always found something new and different and unique. There was ton of variety, flavors, sizes, textures, cereals, big gallon of milk, ton of different cheese, soda and drinks, chips, most of the things that Americans would love to eat. And I was so overwhelmed with the options and the variety that was given to me. Talking about food, I noticed that Americans love or rely a lot on fast food, and not just fast food restaurants, but also fast food, purchasing them at the grocery store. So like frozen food or canned food, which are already pre-made, and all you have to do is put it in a microwave or in the oven and it's done in a couple of minutes. Even if some of them are aware of those food not being so healthy, they still choose the convenience and this time saving over eating healthier. We joke about this with my husband often, that burger for him is like soup for me. I could eat soup every day, and I was when I lived in Hungary, because that's one of our main dish. If I cook soup 2 or 3 times a week, my husband is already complaining about it because he would get bored of it. But in the same way, he could eat burger every day, because it's interesting just how our body gets used to some type of food. The other thing I noticed about food is when we had kids and we would go to a restaurant, how they would have a separate kids menu, usually in like a coloring page, so kids can color and draw and make some activities on these books while we're waiting for the food, which is pretty convenient and fun. And I started noticing some of these in Europe too, which is really cool. But the funny thing is that no matter what kind of restaurant you go to, Chinese, Italian, American, or Japanese, the kids' menu are almost always the same. You can choose from macaroni and cheese, hamburger, corn dog, pizza, chicken, what is it called? Chicken strips, or I don't know, because my kids usually get pasta, which is mac and cheese, or pizza. Or let's not forget about fries. I try all the time to have my kids eat the same food what we are eating, but years and years of doing this, it's just kind of got away from me, and now it's convenient and it's easier to make our kids eat what's offered for them because they're kind of expecting it too, unfortunately. When you walk into a restaurant, you can't just go and sit down anywhere you want. There is a person who's welcoming you, and you have to tell them how many people are coming and if you're gonna be eating or just drinking, and they usually tell you a time when the table is going to be ready. And you have these waiting areas are usually outside of the restaurant, so people walking by the restaurant, they can see like, oh, how busy and full that is, but when you actually go in, there are empty tables. So that was different for me. And even these days when I would have guests coming, family coming here from Europe, they would just kind of walk in the restaurant trying to find a table, and I always have to tell them, just come back, wait here. You have to wait for the person to tell you if you can go and where you have to sit. No matter what kind of drink you order, you're always gonna get water with it, which is free, and there's always ice in it. And I'm a European who never changes, and I always want my ice with my water with no ice. As we eat and as we sit there at the table, if our water glass gets empty, the waitress would come and refill it. So you have unlimited water and you can just drink as much as you want. Culture shock number 2, everything is based on convenience, on saving time, and everything is really fast paced. Most of the things that you can find here are disposable, like paper plates, which was really fun for me to notice, and I am still not used to it, and I don't have paper plates in our house. I'm still don't feel like eating off of paper plates, but everywhere we go to somebody's house, they use that because then they don't have to do the dishes. A lot of things are packaged into a package, so you have like smaller options, little snacks, little cheese sticks, that they're big package and small package in a big package in case you only want to open one, which is very goes for convenience and practicality. I think they do that because then maybe people won't throw away food so often. The other convenience is that there are a lot of drive-thrus here, and not just restaurants like McDonald's we have in Hungary, but also coffee shops, Starbucks, or pharmacy. You can go to the pharmacy without getting out of your car, or bank. You can go do your transaction, talk to the banker, or go to the ATM and get some cash out without getting out of your car. And I remember taking pictures of Adam as we were driving through the bank. There is barely any public transportation. There is no train or barely any buses here, at least where we lived in the smaller cities. But because in Hungary, we had buses all the time coming every 10-15 minutes in every little village and every little city. Number 3. This is how I do 3. This is how my husband does 3. People are extremely friendly and polite. Like my parents notice it all the time when they come here. It's just something that you can't get enough. It's normal here if you walk on a street that people who are passing by, they would smile at you, wave at you. Strangers would try to chit chat with you at the elevator, at the restaurant, or at the store. The cashier would talk to you, smile at you. People would let you in at the door. If you're driving a car, they would let you have a parking spot. So mostly if you come here from a country that's lacking this, then you would definitely notice that here. Sometimes it's even too much. Like what's like, whoa, too much for me is when I go to like a restaurant or grocery store. So it's usually when you have to stop and wait for a couple of minutes. So you have a cashier or you are at the drive-through restaurant and they are giving out your food. So there's a couple of minutes time that you're spending with this stranger. They always feel like, or maybe they're trained that way, that they have to chat with you, just like basic chats. And most of the time it's how are you, how is your day going, and that usually just means hi. So it doesn't mean that they actually want to know that how are you doing today. I know that's kind of a weird for foreigners here in America, that when somebody, a stranger, asks them like how are you, and you just say back I'm good, or how are you, you ask back. But what goes a little bit above of that for me is when somebody asks the next question is, what are your plans for today? What have you done today? What are you guys doing tonight? And I feel that very, very personal. Like I'm not really a closed person. I don't really have a closed personality. Like I'm okay chatting with people, but when they make me think and share with them, with a stranger, of what I'm doing today, it's kind of over the board for me. To be honest. But what drives me crazy with my husband is that when he gets into this polite mode, when there is a situation, this is a very good example. When you are at a grocery store and there's multiple cashiers open, and you kind of are trying to find where you want to get in a line, and obviously you're gonna find a line that's shorter, right? But I feel like here in America, just everybody is just assuming that every line is the same and everybody is just gonna be polite and wait in line. Nobody's gonna get in front of anybody, and they just kind of, where they finish shopping, just get in that line. And so usually when I walk to the other end, there's barely any line. Americans don't feel this pressure of fighting for their spot or fighting for their seating. In the same with when we go to some event and you have to find a spot where to sit down, like I would just like go there and try to fight through everybody and sit down, because that's just how we are in Europe, especially in Italy. Like there's no line. You just get there and get that coffee or get at the spot that you need. But here people just tend to give each other more space and have more distant from each other and be more polite and be like, oh, you can go ahead. I don't know, that just drives me crazy with Adam, that he doesn't have that in him and I do, which is sometimes we get into this funny situation. Also, I noticed that people are not really close to their families. Maybe that's because it's so common that you would move away to a different city or different state from your family when you grew up. But I mean, I talk to my mom almost every day, and that's normal for me. But my husband always says that that's kind of weird, that I always talk to my mom and I share everything with my family and they know everything about me. So maybe that's just my experience, because I don't know so many families that close to know their relationship. I tend to have this feeling that European families are more closer and more connected with each other. Maybe that's why also friendships are a little bit different, not so deep than they are in Europe. Those friends that we consider really close, you would know so much about that person. And here I feel like they're throwing the weight friendship so easy without actually having that connection, at least not what I would imagine from a true friendship to have and to be. That's good to know when you move here, and just to have a little bit different expectations. And people tend to have a little bit more privacy. They don't really talk about personal or financial things or anything that they feel it would be maybe make them vulnerable. I don't know. Even physically, they don't like to stay too close to each other. In Europe, we kiss on our cheeks when we greet somebody, and here it's mostly hugging, if that. But it's sometime if it's a stranger, then it's not even a hug. Number 4 is about gatherings and parties as we got married. When I was getting to know Adam's friends, we didn't have any kids, so we would go out more often, and I had a lot of culture shock based on that culture. Like I mentioned before, it's about creating friendships that were surprisingly surface based for me. It's mostly about small chats, no deep conversations. And then when we would go over to a friend's house, or when we would have these get-togethers, gatherings, or parties, or whatever you call it, what was really surprising me that most of these times it was about doing some type of activity together, maybe watching a game or playing a game. Americans have lots of games to play, board games or video games, or watching games, watching movies. Most conversations and most talks goes around that game and goes with that activity. In Europe, you just get together with somebody and you guys are just talking about life, talking about feelings and life things, experiences, your future. Even when it's a wedding or a birthday party, now that I have kids, we go a lot of birthday parties. Everything is kind of organized and structured and scheduled. Everything is timed up and everything is going on the same way at every birthday party. You have a cake cutting, a present opening, you have a couple of activities you do together, you eat, and then you go home. When I was little, I would invite a couple of my friends over. We would run around on the street or in the backyard, then go inside in my room, play some toys, and parents would come over if we are in that kind of relationship. When we have guests coming to our home, we also have like home shoes for everybody, because you have to take your shoes off. Well, you don't have to, but everybody kind of knows, like, you come to somebody's home and you knock your shoes off. And because we don't really have carpet, you would be given home shoes, and you put those on and you're just in these home shoes in somebody's house. Which here it would be really, I think people would be looking at me like, I'm not putting that on. I don't want anybody to get so offensive of, well, it's not like that for us, because I'm sure that it's not like that for everybody, and I don't want to feel like I have to apologize all the time based on my experiences, because these are also cultures that people experience differently. Number 5, and we're almost done. There are so many rules and laws and expectations here, and everybody just tends to follow it and everything works perfectly. Schedules, doctor appointments, if there's a rule like a parking lot that only handicap, there's no way that anybody would park there that has no handicap. Everybody puts their seat belt on. Just everything is, like I said, structured, and everybody is following the rules. And there are lots of rules. There's lots of signs everywhere. I remember that was so funny. I was taking pictures of those too. Like, if you go to the public restaurant, there is a sign that says employees need to wash their hands after they use the bathroom. When you buy something, you have a label on that says specifically all the rules and expectations. Speaking of expectations, Americans are also expecting you to have perfect teeth. That's something very important for them. And they achieve that by putting braces on all of the kids. Most of them have braces when they are little. They have their wisdom teeth taken out, which was also unheard of for me. That's something I never had done. And the 6th thing is how many times American couples would tell each other, I love you. It was a little bit weird for me at the beginning with my husband. Now I don't even notice it, but it's just kind of part of our conversation. When you say goodbye to your spouse or to your partner, you say, I love you, bye, or on the phone also. I know that a lot of cultures, saying I love you is a very sensitive and a unique and rare thing to say to each other. It doesn't happen all the time, especially not multiple times a day. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, and I do that with my kids too, but that was definitely a culture shock for me to hear it so often and to have somebody who wants me to say it so often. The other culture shock was that I heard that a lot of saying that friends would say that to each other. I love you more, or I miss you. And I remember first time hearing that out of my husband's mouth, and somebody that his friend was, and saying that it felt really weird for me, because you don't say that to your friends, especially if it's the opposite sex. I love you or I miss you. And that was something that I just kind of had to understand, that it's part of the culture. And even if you say I love you to certain people, it's a different kind of love. All right, these are my culture shocks that I had coming to America from Europe. And if you're listening that and you're in the same situation, or you came from another culture and you had some different experience, it's different culture shock than me, I would love if you can hop on and join me on my Facebook group, and maybe you can share that with us, and maybe there's something that I forgot by now. Thank you so much for listening, guys. If you know somebody who would love to see this video, don't forget to share it. Have a good day, have a good weekend, and wherever you are in the world, and I will talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.